I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you.
I'm going to kill you seems to have become something of a catchphrase for the Walking Dead star Rick Grimes during the last couple of years, yet the person he has repeatedly directed said phrase at, Negan, remains very much alive and well despite their repeated close encounters. One of the most criticised aspects of the show during this season especially has been Rick's constant failure to end Negan when given the opportunity, resulting in the viewer having to sit through fight scenes which, although granted may be entertaining to watch, lack any real sense of tension or intrigue. We all know Rick isn't going to kill Negan in the season premiere, but we got a scene of him trying to shoot at him anyway. We all know Negan isn't going to die halfway into a season which is centred on the conflict between Rick's group and the Saviours, but we got a sequence featuring the pair of them fighting one another in Alexandria. Finally, we all know that Negan isn't going to die in some grubby basement during the 12th episode of a season. But as you guessed it, we also had to witness Rick and Negan battling it out in what appeared to be a run-down abandoned building. There was never any chance of either Rick or Negan being in any real danger during the examples I just mentioned, so in that case you could raise the question, why even include these scenes on the show in the first place? But I believe the answer is down to the fact that the writers and the creative team behind The Walking Dead desperately want to present Negan and Rick, the two central characters behind the all-out war narrative, at each other's throats as much as possible. However, the issue that arises when having the two constantly fighting is that it can seem a bit ridiculous that neither can kill the other, especially when it feels like to the viewer that they come face to face nearly every week. So then, what is the solution to the Rick and Negan conundrum? Well, honestly, it's hard to pinpoint an exact answer. I suppose you could suggest that the show could just refrain from placing Rick and Negan in situations where realistically one of them should die. Having Rick and Negan trash talk over the radio is fine, but having multiple scenes in which Rick's usual deadly aim turns to absolute crap preventing him from landing a bullet on Negan can be a bit jarring to watch. Honestly, I think this is something which the Governor story arc handled really well, as during said arc, yes, we all knew that Rick and the Governor wanted to kill each other, but they didn't continuously find themselves in situations whereby they arguably could and should have done so. Using Rick's Woodbury rescue mission as an example, I would say that due to all the smoke and commotion that was occurring, Rick didn't even get a chance to get a real peek of the Governor whilst he was there. Yes, I accept that the Governor was standing out in the open, but it makes sense during this instance that Rick didn't kill him. More so anyway than when Negan is just standing outside on a bloody balcony like he has a massive target on his head saying please shoot here. Secondly, although the entry arrow on the doorpost is centred on Rick and the Governor having a face-to-face meeting, again I think it actually makes sense that neither murders the other during this installment. Sure, you could argue that either Rick or the Governor could have just shot the other, but it wouldn't have been in either's best interest to do so. Rick had men on the outside, as did the Governor, and as soon as one or the other pulled the trigger, bullets and bodies would have gone flying everywhere, most likely resulting in Rick and Philip both dead anyway. So surely that's it then, problem solved. Just have Rick and Negan not find themselves together in dangerous situations and everything will be great, right? Well, not quite. See, the problem is that although this is a valid suggestion, I would say that if you remove the Rick and Negan fight sequences completely, then the two would most likely never come face to face save for the final confrontation. And when you're trying to build up the idea of a conflict between these two characters over the course of an entire season, it would just be a bit weird to have the two even barely interact with one another. If Rick weren't to fight Negan directly for much of the season, then he'd probably just spend more time shooting down generic saviour soldiers, and I'm not really sure this is any better than the situation we have currently. You could perhaps have some other characters for Rick to focus on instead of Negan, who Rick encounters and kills, which then weakens the saviours, allowing him to access Negan, kind of like a ladder which Rick must climb in order to reach the big bad at the top. However, to me this concept just feels too much like something out of a video game, and I'm not sure it would be any more entertaining to watch than what we have currently. I think that viewers genuinely want to see Rick and Negan engaging with one another, trading insults and trying to outwit each other. I know that some of the best moments for me this season have been seeing these kind of conversations between the two play out. For instance, Rick and Negan's little chat over the radio in episode 10 was a highlight of that installment for me, and I also loved it when the two were trying to find each other in the dark dilapidated house during episode 12, with them both desperately trying to belittle the other. When the two of them are on screen together they can light up a room, and make me feel more engaged than if I was viewing a conversation between pretty much any other two members of The Walking Dead's cast. However, as previously mentioned though, the issue is that how do you get them to have these conversations with one another without it feeling a bit silly? There's only so many times they can be separated in the same building trying to talk to one another or speak over the radio before it starts to feel a bit contrived. Another suggestion I would put forward is that if the Negan arc hadn't gone on for so long, there wouldn't have been the need for them both to repeatedly fail to kill one another. As visually interesting as the flaming Lucille fight was, you can't deny that deep down it did feel a bit like filler, especially when knowing that neither Rick or Negan was in any real danger. If only half a season was dedicated to Negan establishing that the Saviours were in charge, and half a season dedicated to all-out war, surely there would be less instances of Rick trying to hit Negan with the wrong end of a baseball bat. Perhaps I'm being too critical and I should accept that this is a problem that plagues a lot of shows. I mean, you could just as easily make the argument that Rick has also been in a ton of positions where he should have died, only to be conveniently saved at the last minute, but because he's the show's protagonist, everyone is more accepting of that. However, it still feels to me like Rick has had far more chances to kill Negan only to not take them than he has done with every other antagonist on the show. And I think that's why I and other fans can be a bit critical when we see yet another instance of him firing bullets at thin air instead of Negan. I feel as though the writers have found themselves in a bit of a damned if they do, damned if they don't situation when it comes to showing Negan and Rick clashing. I mean, I'm sure that if Rick and Negan had hardly any fight scenes with one another, then people would probably moan due to wanting to see more direct confrontations. However, when you have a situation like we have now whereby Rick has already had at least 3 clear opportunities in this season alone to kill the Saviour's leader, then as a member of the show's creative team you will find yourself under scrutiny. I love seeing Rick and Negan both on screen, but at the same time I just wish the show was a bit more sparing when it comes to the scenes in which Rick is trying to kill him. The more scenes you show of Rick being incompetent failing to kill Negan, the less invested I find myself in these scenes. I am 100% confident that Negan isn't going to die at the end of the season anyway, with Rick being the one who spares him, which I should point out is absolutely fine and I have no problem with that story route being taken. However, I feel that if Rick were to encounter Negan in a one-on-one situation at the end of the season for the first time, with him having the opportunity to kill him, only to then not do so by choice and spare him, this would be much more effective than it being preceded by a couple of other scenes of Rick also clashing with Negan mano a mano. I don't mind them talking to one another throughout the course of the season, that's fine, I want to see that, but I really don't think Rick should have had so many opportunities to kill him, only not to do so already. So there you have it, there's some of my views about the frequent fights between Rick and Negan. As always, please let me know your thoughts below. Do you agree with this, or do you think that such a problem doesn't actually exist? As always, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.